Good morning, class. So, I'm your teacher, Sophia. I'm teacher Cassandra E. So, before we start our discussion, let's have first our training topic. So, this game is called Mock Winner. So, in case you have some mistake, we'll answer our question. So, when I say pop, you will like that. Then if I say winner, you will clap your hands. Okay? You get my point? Yes. Okay, so please. Ah! Winner! Winner! Why? So, next I will answer my question. So let's start. Do you have any idea what total physical response is?
For me, it is method of teaching language or vocabulary using language.
Yes, that's right. You got it right. So that's all for our motivational reading. Now let's proceed to our topic or discussion. Okay, now that we already done with our motivational activity, now let's move on to our main topic, which is the natural approach and total physical response. So here are the proponents of the natural approach, Mr. Stephen Krushen and Mr. Tracy Farrell. So Mr. Stephen Krushen is a famous linguist. He is currently a professor at University at Southern California, while Tracy Dale Farrell was an American education theorist who, along with Stephen Krushen, and also who wrote The Natural Approach, and he is also a professor at University of California. Now, let's move on to the main topic, which is the natural approach. So, what is natural approach? Natural approach believes that adults can still acquire second languages. The ability of language acquisition does not disappear as we grow up. So, the natural approach posits that adults maintain the ability to acquire second languages, rejecting the belief that this capacity diminishes with ages. So it means that learning natural approach doesn't require any age. According to this approach, language learning remains feasible and relevant throughout adulthood. Adults also acquire language by following the principles of universal grammar. The difference between adult and children acquisition skill is that adults have two things to follow when they learn foreign language, which is the acquisition and learning, but children only acquire the learning. Acquire the languages rather. So it suggests that adults acquire language by adhering to universal grammar. So when we say universal grammar, it means it refers to inherent linguistic structures and principles common to all languages, guiding language acquisitions in both adults and children. So one of the example of universal grammar is the principle of recursion. So it is the repeated embedding of clauses. For instance, the ability to say, the cat that chased the mouse that lived in the house is black. So it demonstrates how languages universally incorporate recursion for constructing intricate expressions. Now let's move on to the 5 hypotheses of Stephen Krushen. First, we have the acquisition learning hypothesis, the most basic steps of all in the Krushen's theory, and it's the most well-known and among linguists and language practitioners. So the acquisition learning hypothesis, Krushen distinguishes between language acquisition, which is the unconscious and the natural learning, and language learning, which is the conscious or formal instruction. So he argues that acquisition is more important for developing language proficiency than learning. Now, we have the monitor hypothesis. So the monitor hypothesis is when the learner can check and correct language output. So Prussian says that the learned system, which is the conscious knowledge of grammar rules, act as a monitor, which allows individuals to edit and correct their language output. However, this monitoring has a limited role in spontaneous communication. Now, the third one is the natural order hypothesis. When people acquire language by using grammatical structures and predictable order. So, the natural order hypothesis, Prussian proposes that language is acquired in a predictable natural order. Certain grammatical structures are acquired before others, regardless of explicit instruction. Now, the fourth one is the input hypothesis. Learners progress in their knowledge of the language when they comprehend language input that is slightly more advanced than their current level. So, this hypothesis posits that language is acquired when learners are exposed to comprehensible input, slightly above their current proficiency level. Understanding input that is bit challenging but still understandable facilitates language development. Now the last one is the input hypothesis. I am sorry, it is not input hypothesis. It is the affective filter hypothesis. So sorry for the error. The affective filter hypothesis, language cannot be learned if learner is blocking the learning process. So it means that emotional factors such as motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety can act as filter influencing the success of language acquisition. A lower affective filter associated with positive emotions is conductive to language learning. So these five hypotheses collectively form Prussian's input hypothesis framework, which has had a significant impact on the field of second language acquisition. Now, we have the natural approach objectives. First, the natural approach is for beginners and is designed to help them become intermediate. Specific objectives depend upon learner needs and the skill and level being taught. Prussian and Terrell feel it is important to communicate to learners what they can expect as well as they should not expect. So, the natural approach is tailored for beginners to progress to an intermediate level. Objectives vary based on learner needs and the specific skill and level being taught. Prussian and Terrell emphasize clear communication to manage learners' expectations about what to expect and what not to expect during the learning process. Now, let's move on to the natural approach syllabus. Prussian and Terrell approach course from 2 points of view, which is the goal for language courses and the purpose of a language course will vary according to the needs of the students. So for the goals for language courses, it is to adopt the diverse needs of students. We need to tailor language courses to specific objectives. While the second syllabus which is the purpose of language course will vary according to the needs of the students. So it means that recognizing the purpose of language course can differ based on the unique requirements and goals of the students involved. Now, let's move on to the types of learning and teaching activities. First, we have emphasis is on presenting comprehensible input in the target language. So, in this types of learning and teaching activities, teachers ensure that the language they use is understandable to learners. This involves using vocabulary and structures that are within the student's current proficiency level. Next is the teacher provides comprehensible language and simple response opportunities. So teachers use language that students can comprehend easily and create opportunities for simple responses. This helps build confidence and encourages active participation. The third one is learners are not required to say anything until they feel ready. Students are given the freedom to choose when they feel comfortable speaking. This approach respects individual learning styles and reduces anxiety associated with forced participation. The fourth one is the teacher talks slowly and distinctly, asking questions and eliciting one-word answers. So it is what we call um, uh, so what we call that? A it is natural to teachers to ask questions, right? So teachers use deliberate pace, clear pronunciation, and ask questions that prompt short answers. This aids in comprehension and provides opportunities for students to practice responding. Now, we have the acquisition activities are emphasized. So the focus is on activities that promote language acquisition. These activities may include interactive and engaging exercises that encourage natural learning. Next is pair or group work may be employed. So that is more important in learning, in learning and teaching activities. So students work together in pairs or group to enhance communication skills. This fosters a collaborative learning environment, allowing learners to practice the language in a social context. Okay, the last one, techniques recommended by Krashen and Terrell are often borrowed other methods and adapted. So the natural approach draws on effective teaching techniques from various methods and adjusts them to suit its principle. This flexibility allows for a diverse and dynamic approach to language instruction. Now, let's move on to the teacher's rules and learner's rules. So in teacher's rules, teachers act as an authority in the class, imitate the first language learning process, and creatively instruct students to do activities that benefit the language learner. So I think it is self-explanatory. Now let's move on to learner's rules. So in learner's rules, there are there are three stages, which are the pre-production stage, early production stage, and speech emergence stage. So in pre-production stage, learners participate in the language activity without having respond. So in this stage, learners engage in language activities without actively responding verbally. They are observing the language and building comprehension before actively producing it. Second, early production stage. Learners answer questions with single words and short phrases. So in this stage, learners begin to respond to questions. So we observe that it have what we call that it has development right in this stage. So typically with single words or short phrases, it marks the initial phase of expressing themselves verbally in the target language. Now the last one is the speech emergent stage. Learners involve themselves in role plays, games, and other activities. So in this stage, learners become more actively involved in language use through activities such as role plays and games. This stage focuses on encouraging learners to express themselves more extensively and participate in interactive language-based tasks. Now, let's move on to the role of instructional materials. First, make classroom activities as meaningful as possible and promote comprehension and communication. Second, the primary aim of materials is to promote comprehension and non-communication. Third, pictures and other visual aids are essential because they supply the content for communication. And lastly, materials come from the world of realia rather than from textbooks. So, the role of instructional materials in the natural approach is to make classroom activities meaningful, emphasizing comprehension and communication. Materials aim to support understanding, and visuals like pictures play a crucial role in providing content for communication. Unlike traditional textbooks, materials often derive from real world objects and experiences. Now let's proceed to the procedures of the natural approach. So Grasham and Terrell provide suggestions for the use of a wide range of activities which are familiar components of situational language teaching and communicative language teaching and others. So the best example of situational language teaching is role plays because this actively encourages learners to apply language in real life contexts, supporting the principles of both situational language teaching and communicative language teaching. So start with TPR commands. So TPR commands, or what we call total physical response, is command is a language teaching method where students respond physically to spoken commands. In TPR commands, teachers give instructions in the target language and students respond with corresponding physical actions. So, for instance, I will tell you to point the door. So, the student's response is to point the door like that. So they will respond physically, or they will move, or they will have action to respond the command. So that is the TPR commands. So use TPR to teach names of body parts and to introduce members and sequence. Introduce classroom terms and props into commands. Use names of physical characteristics and clothing to identify members of the class by name. Use visual, typically magazine pictures to introduce a new vocabulary and to continue with activities requiring only student names as response. Combine use of pictures with TPR. Combine observations about the pictures with command and conditionals. And lastly is using several pictures, ask students to point to the pictures and being described. So it is more on pictures and pointing of pictures. So TPR command is more on teaching you to point out a specific pictures, or yeah. So in overall, the natural approach incorporating TPR commands focuses on learning a language through immersion and understanding. With TPR commands, teachers give directions in the language and learners respond with physical action. This hands-on approach enhances language comprehension by connecting words with movements, making the learning experience more natural and enjoyable. So, for you to, in order for you to to understand more effectively about the TPR, or the total physical response, my partner Cassandra Ishii will take charge of that. So that's all. Thank you.
Hi again, I'm Cassandra Ishii. So since Miss Sophia already discussed her topic about the natural approach, now let's move on to my topic, which is TPR, or total physical response. So what exactly is a total physical response? Total physical response is a language teaching method that involves using physical movement to facilitate learning. In TPR, students respond to commands given by the teacher through physical actions. The idea is that by associating language with movement, learning is enhanced, particularly in the early stages of language acquisition. So since early children are not really expected to speak immediately, instead they are more expected to listen and comprehend about what the adults are saying to them. So therefore, the idea of TPR in a nutshell is a neural link between speech and action. So next slide is Dr. James J. Asher. He's a professor of psychology at San Jose State University in San Jose, California, and the founder of TPR or Total Physical Response. So for your information, Dr. James Asher calls TPR a stress-free method. That's because the students are not really expected to speak, so there is no pressure at all. So next slide is the principles of TPR. First is stimulating memory with psychomotor associations. So in this principle, this is the way to recreate the process by which children learn their first language. So the second one is comprehension before production. So in this principle, students are not really required to produce in the second language until they themselves decide that they are ready. So the third one is lowering the students' anxiety and stress reduction. The fourth one, inductive teaching of grammar. And the last one is the unobtrusive error correction in the early stages. So in this principle, Asher believes that it is more important to let the students just talk in order to lower their anxiety about making mistakes. So there are some examples of TPR. It could be classroom language instructions such as open your book and close your book. And also there are activities such as circle games, nursery rhymes, songs, and many more. So that ends my lesson about TPR or Total Physical Response. So I hope you learned something from me or from us. And thank you for watching and listening.